Perfect. All right, so we are here with two incredible souls. We are here with Mike the Vegan and Mark Stimson, and today we're going to be getting into some incredible topics here. And why don't you guys each share a little bit about your backgrounds and just how you guys met each other to get us started here.
Okay, well, I think the background that we have, how we met each other, was he was my teacher in sustainability and, helped keep me from getting electrocuted doing stupid stuff. And, inspired me on a bunch of cool topics and building stuff, especially like physical stuff. And, if you don't know me, I have a YouTube channel called Mike the Vegan. Been doing that for like 9 years and recently hit 400,000 subscribers, which is awesome. Super grateful for that. And so it's always fun to come back and, say hi to people who helped influence me. And hopefully work together a little bit. We'll see. So I don't know if you want to go.
Sure. Yeah. Sustainability. My involvement with it goes to, I would say, way before we called it sustainability. I was a child of the late 60s, early 70s. I was into like wild crafting and like Yule Gibbons and Helena Scott Nearing, their whole homesteading thing. Of course, Bucky Fuller. We had one of the first Fuller domes kind of in our neighborhood on Cape Cod, and all the stuff that goes with it. My mom was kind of a, I guess in a sense, a hippie farmer. Did a great job. We always had a great garden on the Cape. And let me see, there was the New Alchemy Institute on the Cape, which was another one of those really kind of formative groups that was into passive solar, geothermal, wind power, all of that. So anyway, we didn't call it sustainability then. I guess that would come under the umbrella of the environmental or environmentalist movement. And then sometime in the late 80s, I guess the term sustainability came onto the scene, and then I joined the Department of Sustainable Living at MIU in 2007, and it was right after that Mike and I were working together on various things, and it's been good.
Yeah, for sure. And then I actually didn't even mention how I got into sustainability. I mean, part of it, I think I was lucky to just be influenced by the community. I also later realized that my dad was part of the first wind turbine project ever in New York City. I was like, what? He just didn't even mention it. And so I had that influence, and then I was just, at the local college, and I was just like, oh, I want to do that class and that class, and they were all sustainability classes. That's just how it happened. And it's funny you mentioned Buckminster Fuller, because I think I just, for the first time, accidentally did the Dymaxion sleep schedule, where he goes, out of 8 hours, I think he sleeps 30 minutes. Yeah. And we had a 24-hour trip back from Europe, and I slept 30 minutes, and then 8 hours later I slept 30 minutes. And oh, this sort of works. I kind of felt like, maybe my body needed more time. Anyway, details aside, so that's how I started sustainability, just liking it more, and then of course understanding the urgency, being told about how things are actually changing and the science on that, of course, got me motivated to actually study it more. So.
Gotcha. And then now, so if you could get into some of your motivations behind why you decided to join the program at MIU, and how that evolved over the years into what you ended up doing afterwards, after the program ended.
Well, my partner will say it's just because they were the classes that she was taking, so I wanted to take the same classes that she was taking. I just love being hands-on, and then of course I was motivated by, again, the actual urgency of climate change. And I think there's a creativity aspect to it as well. I was raised in the whole destination imagination thing, where you're trying to do creative problem solving, and then it's like, oh, here's the biggest problem that needs the most creativity possible. And so I was like, okay, I'll get into that instead of just doing some business degree or something so I can make money. And so that's how I started. I guess everyone has their own story, but for me it was just sort of just interest brought me there.
And then Mark, do you want to get into what your motivations were for?
Motivations?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, obviously it goes way back to the late 60s and early 70s. I remember when I was a kid, we used to drive down the New York, New Jersey corridor to go see my grandmother. And back in the day, that whole corridor was rows and rows of factories with huge smokestacks spewing out sulfur smoke. And from New York City, you couldn't even see the George Washington Bridge because of the pollution. And then I also remember crossing the Androscoggin River in Maine, and this would be in the early 70s. And the river had a layer of yellow sulfurous foam on top of it, 3 feet thick, from the paper mills upstream that were then allowed to just dump their effluent directly into the river. And so it had been declared a dead river. There's no life in it. And so I saw what it was like to live with unbridled pollution. And luckily, back at that time, we had we got to give credit to Richard Nixon for extending and expanding the Clean Air and Clean Water Acts, which is for a Republican president. That's all right.
Back before it was politicized.
He had his faults. Before it's politicized. He had his faults, obviously, but he did that, and we saw real change in the decades that followed that. And so, that was my initial motivation for being involved. All this was, pollution, and then, of course, the climate change thing came on later, along with the urgency about carbon emissions and all of that. And so it's just been building, one thing after another. But my focus more recently has been more in the social realm. In other words, I no longer view sustainability as being an issue of technology. Obviously, technology has a lot to do with it, and it's very important, where we go with it, what we do with it. But I'm much more interested in the social aspects of sustainability. And by that I mean the social and economic systems that we all live under and actually can't seem to escape. And a lot of those systems they're destructive. They're exploitive of people and extractive of the environment, and so that's where my focus is these days.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So technology, I feel like maybe in the 70s and 80s, we didn't have the technology to solve climate change yet, and then we got it. And this feels a lot like homelessness, where we still have homeless people, but we have more than enough houses for the homeless people. So it's a matter of socially what decisions we're making, and then governmentally what decisions we're making. So obviously we have the solar resources, we have the renewable resources, the geothermal resources to be completely sustainable, and then reverse the climate damage that we've had through like replanting and reusing land, just changing how we use land at least. And we're not doing it. And so I think that's a really good point. It's like we got to change how people think, and that's where a lot of it has to do with you almost need to study propaganda and like political science at this point, because we're seeing just the most effective power against climate change, in my opinion, it might be those Russian troll farms and just the political narrative about climate change not being real, which is why I have that video debunking the top 5 myths on it, etc. And so how do we fight that? I guess we have to learn about it, but it's also, you can know everything about it and still not have $10 billion or whatever. So